Hello and welcome to the podcast, Your HR Career. This is episode 3, and I am talking to the very delightful Joanne McNeil. Welcome to the show, Joanne.
Thank you very much, Jane. Thank you for inviting me.
Marvellous. Now, you did really good homework beforehand. I've been giving everybody who's coming to chat with me, I've given them some questions to have a think about before the show. So I'll refer to those as we go through. So I was very delighted by your answers, Joanne, in some of the areas. So I'm going to be digging deep into some of those because I think you are an absolute goldmine of fantastic information to share to our listeners who are developing their HR careers. So let's get started. And why don't you tell us a little bit about where it all began for you? Where did HR start?
HR came to me kind of by accident. So I had originally left school and joined the police. I'd moved down to London as a very green 16-year-old and joined the Metropolitan Police.
Was that even legal then? 16
it was.
Police.
16.
Wow.
By the time I reached my 18th birthday, I was then a police officer.
Wow.
Yes. When I look back now, it horrifies me, the things that I got involved in, the things that I saw. Yeah. But I think it shaped me as a person. So, I am grateful for that. So anyway, long story short, left the police when I had my son and then decided to go to university as a mature student. Went to university and thought that I would do sports sciences because I had in my mind that if I was running around a hockey pitch or a netball court or something like that, there wouldn't be a lot of writing involved. I was wrong. That was a big learning curve for me. Biomechanics. Who knew biomechanics was a thing? Anyway, so I was very much determined that I was going to go down a sports route. I'd looked at coaching, I'd looked at sports development work, but there was nothing that really attracted me. There's nothing in the local area. And in the careers centre in the university, there was an advert for a fixed term role working at rail track. So this was when the railways had been broken up into different operating companies, and rail track were responsible for the tracks that the trains ran on, and they wanted someone to help out doing HR admin for a couple of months. So I applied, got the job, and thought, I like this. This is interesting. Yeah. This is varied. And I originally started off in the recruitment team. Then I went into the ER team, and at that time, very, very heavily unionized. Lots of industrial disputes, etc. So it was a really, really interesting role. And from there, I thought, I think this suits me. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of learning in there. And then I saw a role that was a permanent role again in the area where I lived. That was within a manufacturing factory, and I got that role again, heavily unionized, lots of restricted practices, really quite traditional. It makes me laugh now to even talk about it, but we had an office that was locked and it had a window that would slide across, and people would knock on the window and we'd slide it across and say, "Yes, how can I help you?" And then close the window again when they'd gone. Brilliant. And that really was my step into HR. And I've been there ever since.
So fascinating. So join the dots for me then. Police.
Yeah.
Some sort of physical education, sports science.
Yeah.
And HR. What is the connection? What do you think it was about your personality or work style preference that means that all three of those landed at some point?
I think if you ask me, I think I've always been a little bit contrary. So, and I know you're laughing and going, surely not. But yeah, I've always been.
I know you well enough to know that's true.
Yes. And these were things that I was almost told I couldn't do.
Okay.
It wasn't expected of me. So, I mean, wanting to join the police, I remember doing an application at the age of 13 because, that's what I decided I wanted to do. And my parents were against that. And I just went ahead and I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And in the end, they kind of went, just get on with it. And it was the same going to university. I'd left school with no qualifications whatsoever because I'd been accepted into the police. And so there was an expectation. And at the time I was a single parent, that actually not my life was over, but the expectations of me were quite low. And so, again, I was going to prove that that wasn't the case. So I went to university. And so I think it was more just me being bloody minded as opposed to anything else.
Show you.
Yeah.
So do you think then the sort of the recognition of HR, you talked about variety and constant learning and the challenge of the different situations. Do you think that kind of just felt right? So that wasn't a like, I'm going to show you moment, but that actually was sort of connecting with who you are as a person, wanting that challenge and that change.
I think so. When I think about all the things that I've subsequently done within HR, it's that variety that has kept me interested. So I've always been a generalist, I think it's fair to say, and that has given me so much variety and so much more opportunities, I believe, than had I focused on a particular area such as reward or talent or L&D. In my mind, being a generalist gave me that variety that kept me interested all the time.
And that suited your personal style, your work preference, your personality, however you describe it. And I think that's one of the beauties of HR, isn't it? Is that there's so many different ways you can do it that there's almost something for everyone.
Yes. And that's what I think.
Generalists.
And I think also you kind of, I think, particularly if you're coming into HR straight from university, you may think that there's an area that you want to focus on, but actually that might not be the right area for you. So HR, so I think I want to be saying, don't narrow yourself down when you're thinking about HR, because there's so much that you can learn from it that you might think, actually, that's not my thing, but what I've learned from it is this.
Like you referenced starting in recruitment. These are good skills and good knowledge, but it might not be for you long term. I
mean, I don't want to offend people in recruitment, but no, it's not my thing at all.
But it's a different set of skills and a different style, isn't it? Yeah. Fantastic. Right, good. So we've got you in these traditional environments, you're grappling with ER and IR issues, you're sliding your window backwards and forwards. I'm thinking there's a high-vis jacket. There might be a steel toe cap.
There are, and I still have them.
Absolutely, always ready. Brilliant. So tell me then, the other question that I asked you, and I really loved your answer to it, was what the biggest HR lesson you learned in your early days was. And this is really about getting under the skin of what HR is there for.
I was so after the role local, I was placed in a American company that was, it was an American business, but it had global reach, if that makes sense. And I was in a standalone HR role, which was the first standalone role that I'd been in. Although it was part of a much bigger HR function, it was run from the US. So in terms of the UK and what I was doing at that point in time, I was a standalone HR person on a manufacturing site. And it was about building relationships, and it was about, being part of the leadership team there. And I remember one time we were joking around and we were messing about as a leadership team, and I kind of words to the effect of, you need to be careful, or you need to be nice because pay review's coming up, We
can imagine that sort of casual,
exactly, be nice to HR because pay review's coming up. And one of the leaders took me to one side and he said, look, I need to be honest with you, it's not your decision. It's the manager's decision around pay review. Your role is to help them facilitate that and to give them the information, but you don't own that decision. And it was a real wake-up call for me in terms of, actually, I'm not the boss of things. my role in HR is not to be the boss or the queen or whatever that, you know, joking terms that they used. My role is to support the business to make those decisions. And it was a real shift for me in terms of my understanding of HR.
Yes. And do you think it was because there wasn't anyone there to show you that? You said it was a standalone role. Do you think that's a natural evolution everyone goes through? Why do you think that was coming from?
I think probably because it was a standalone role. As I say, it was part of a bigger HR team. But in those, and again, I feel really old now saying that in those days, we didn't have teams. You know, you didn't jump on a quick call with somebody and discuss something. You know, you were very much, here's what you're doing. You know, there'd be certain things that would come centrally, but the role I was in and the facility I was at had recently been acquired, so it was very new, and there was lots of things that we were changing, etc. Yeah. And it was really about building those relationships. And I think for me, it was, I don't want to say it was a bit of a knockback, but it was really a bit of, you know, HR are not there as the police, I'm going to use that phrase, as the police for the organization. You know, we don't run the place. We're not the rule makers. We're there to support the business in whatever decisions they need to make.
Absolutely. And I have a sense that idea of being a guide rather than an owner or the police of something is easier as we get more experienced. And inevitably that experience comes with age as well. But I think often when we start out in HR, we might imagine that we're very much about rules and control. But I think that evolves as you learn more, that actually we are about guiding and working with and through people.
Exactly.
It shifts, doesn't it, as you develop? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I see it now on some of the HR support groups, you know, where people are saying, you know, I'm doing this and I'm organizing this and I'm running this and I've told them this. And I kind of have to very gently go in and go, but that's not your role. The manager needs to make the decision on this. The manager needs to be responsible for this. You need to support them, but it's them who make the decision. And we actually, as a profession, we do get ourselves into trouble when we make decisions that aren't ours to make.
Yes, absolutely. And I wonder, it's really interesting that you started this on your journey from the police, because there's some of the people that I'm talking to started from either a law or a police background. And I think it's quite interesting to think what that is that sort of feeds into the HR side of being more comfortable with kind of rules and regulations, more comfortable with kind of right and wrong. But then we have to finesse that, don't we?
Yeah.
And we have to make it real and grey and about people. And it's kind of, you start from a very purist perspective, I think, and particularly those who are doing HRM degrees now, which weren't a thing back in our day, for sure. Yeah, makes me sounding old now. But I think you can come away with that quite purist academic view, but then in reality, that gets kind of kicked around a bit, doesn't it?
And I think that's one of the things that I've said to people new into their career is you have to be comfortable in the grey.
Yeah, totally.
Because it isn't black and white, you know, and whilst you can have your policies and your procedures and we have the employment law, it's the interpretation of that creates the grey, and you have to be comfortable in the grey.
Yeah, that's the job. I mean, that is the job, isn't it? Fantastic. I want to move you on now to a really nice tale you told me about. I asked it as what your power move was. So what was the big step in your career? Talk us about that, because I think this is an interesting example of grey in action, around how you got engaged with this overseas European arm and how that kind of worked with speaking to the head of that function. So take us through that.
So again, this was the American company that I had moved to, and I hadn't been there very long, and I'd been invited into a leadership team meeting in the Netherlands, where the European head office was. And I hadn't met the senior leadership team previously, but I was invited into this meeting as the HR person for this UK site that we had. And this was around the getting agreement on the annual performance review process that they had in place.
Yep.
And in that meeting, I was, giving my perspective, and as you know, Jane, sometimes I'm not shy at coming forward with my thoughts. And I ended up arguing quite strongly with the head of HR for Germany at the time. And you go into these things and you say what needs to be said, and then you come away and really I didn't think anything more of it. And about a month later, I got a call from the vice president of HR saying that the VP of that division, who had been in that meeting, wanted me to go and work for him in the Netherlands, setting up the European division. And it completely threw me. I had no expectations of this. I had I wouldn't say any desire to do that move. I was living in the UK. I was a single parent to a young teenager, and that had never ever crossed my mind. But this VP of the division was adamant that he wanted me alongside him to build this European division. And so I went. I upped sticks and we moved out to the Netherlands, and I had the most fantastic part of my career. What was really interesting, though, was before I went out there, a couple of my HR colleagues had said, oh, these guys in Europe are a bit of a nightmare. They're really hard work. They're constantly arguing with us. They don't like HR, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, here we go. I'm walking into a baptism of fire here. And actually, what I found was they just felt as if they hadn't been listened to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I took the time to meet with them all individually, to understand their concerns, to push back where it was appropriate and say, that's interesting that you want to do that, but I don't think now is the right time because this is what we're trying to do. And just really giving them answers which they'd never, ever had before. And it was an amazing opportunity for me. I look back on it with such fondness because of the experience that it gave me at what was, I think, a relatively early part of my career.
Yeah.
I think I'd only been doing HR about 5 or 6 years at that point.
Okay. Yeah.
Excuse me. So to have that opportunity and to work at that level and to work in a pan-European role with all the complexities that brought was just fantastic.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic.
And it must have been really thrilling that they'd had that confidence in you, that they'd seen you in that meeting and thought, this is somebody we'd like to work with. And I think what's interesting is, firstly, you've got you, Joanne, 5-6 years in, but you were just true to yourself, weren't you? You just the way you described them was, I just said what had to be said.
Yeah.
Then you didn't come out of the meeting and spend 3 nights not sleeping, fretting about it, because that was what needed to be said and you moved on.
Yeah.
So that kind of feel of just kind of be true to yourself. And if you feel that needs to be challenged, then you challenge it.
Yeah.
That kind of ownership. But then also this angle of taking opportunities that come up and being open to that. That's an important part of career development as well, isn't it? Is thinking, maybe I'll give it a go. You could have tried it for 3 months and gone, it's not for me, but at least you would have tried.
Exactly. And that's actually what I did. So my son stayed in the UK with a lot of support from my family, and I commuted to the Netherlands.
Wow.
I used to fly on a Monday morning very, very early, and I'd fly back on a Thursday evening. And I did that for 3 months.
Yeah.
To see whether this would work, and it did. And we moved out there, and he had the best time ever, growing up in the Netherlands. And having a different kind of lifestyle than we would have had in the UK. So yes, it was a fabulous opportunity, a really, really great opportunity for me that I hadn't envisaged, but I was willing to take that chance and try it.
Yeah, and by being yourself, that kind of brought you that opportunity, came your way.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I mean, you've had a really varied career, haven't you? And you've done long-term roles and different kind of industries and shorter-term roles. So I was really interested in what your kind of advice you would give to somebody who's starting out in their HR career now. And you gave me 4 different things. So let me lead you through them, and maybe you could just elaborate a little bit on them. So the first bit of advice was be flexible. Say yes and then work out how. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yes, I think sometimes when we're looking at roles, we can look at a job spec and we can go, well, I've not done that part, or I'm not sure about that part. I don't think would do that part really well. And we almost discount ourselves from so many opportunities. And I think, we should be prepared to start at the bottom. We should be prepared to take anything that's offered to us and use that as a learning opportunity, which sounds a bit trite, but it's you never know what you're going to get from that. And it might be as daft as, I don't ever want to do that again, but I now know, and I can put that to one side, and I won't ever look for something like that again. Or it may be, actually, I didn't realize that I really like working with data, which I would never have thought, So I think saying yes and giving it a go gives you more opportunities than saying, well, no, because it's not quite right for me, or it's not quite what I thought I wanted to do. Yeah.
So that would go the same as internal opportunities as it would for
Absolutely.
actually applying for vacancies.
Yeah. And I think within HR, one of the things, if there is ever that opportunity internally to step out of HR, go and work in operations, go and work in finance, just find that opportunity to step out of HR, because what you learn there, you can bring back.
Yeah, totally. And like you say, you never know actually how useful it'll be at what point.
And that's it. Yeah.
Okay. And talk to me about getting shit done.
Oh, yeah. I like getting shit done. I think we can be very much dragged down by the detail and not the delivery. And sometimes 8% is good enough. Because we just need to get something done. And I do see this, particularly around new initiatives or doing change management, that, we spend a lot of time whataboutering, as I call it. Yes, but what about this? What about this? Whataboutering? What if this happens? And instead going, let's try it and see what happens.
Yeah. And I think that's really wise, isn't it, in HR, for people in that mid-stage of their HR career. That's kind of what we're there for, is to make things happen. So don't be the blocker.
Yes.
Don't be the person who's still asking questions or still, saying, what about us? Just actually get in front of it and get something moving.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And you said that you really like it when people say that you're not like anyone in HR.
Yes.
Why is that important to you?
I think within HR, we can get a bad reputation.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from an element of inflexibility. I think it can come from being risk adverse.
Yep.
And I think the pace at which some businesses need to operate, that doesn't sit well. And so I think where HR can really benefit an organization is where they really understand what the organization is trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And can speak the language of that organization.
Yeah.
And so to do that, it's almost, rather than you being seen as, well, that's HR. And I'm using those words, and it really, I'm not going to swear, but it really hacks me off, you know, oh, HR over there. Well, actually, I'm a person.
Mm.
So why don't you say my name? And I think you achieve that when they don't refer to you as your function.
Yes.
When they refer to you as the person.
Yes.
So you know, Joanne's in the meeting and she said X, Y, Z, as opposed to HR have said we can't, or HR have said we can only do this, because when it's done as a person, if this makes sense, when it's a person that they are referring to, you know, Joanne has advised me to do whatever, or Joanne has recommended that I think about. That's how a business operates.
Yeah.
Rather than it being functional direction. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Well, it's about the personal connection, isn't it? Because you are a person advising another person. What your roles are when you all have a common goal it should be irrelevant, really. It's more about, you are an advisor advising me, let's say I'm a line manager, whoever. Whereas if you put it as HR, it's kind of, it's faceless, isn't it? And it's like hiding behind management said or HR said. But I think a mark of HR having credibility within a business is when they see you as a person.
Yes, and I also think
an expert. Yeah.
And by doing that, you're also bringing your breadth of experience to that conversation.
Yes. Yeah. And it is about making human connections, isn't it? Making personal connections. Yeah. And being credible. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, we have time for one last question. So tell us, Joanne, where you are now in your career and what's next for you.
So I'm predominantly contracting. Again, I still love that variety. I've just recently finished a contract where I was an ER specialist, for want of a better word, dealing with complex cases in a regulated organization. And it's funny because I've never seen ER as my thing, but it was an interesting role. It was a type of organization I hadn't worked in previously, which made the role more interesting for me. And it was very much case management, dealing with complex cases, but actually what I enjoyed from it was working with senior people in the business to understand how they got to the position that they are with this issue, what had happened previously, and almost business partnering.
Yeah.
ER.
Yeah. And it's that kind of case management approach, isn't it?
Yes.
Let's work together
and my question would always be, what are you trying to achieve from this?
Yeah.
What do you need to get to? What's going to work for you in this situation? And kind of understand where they're coming from, as opposed to, well, you can't do that, or you'll have to do this, or this is the only route you can use.
But again, it reflects that earlier comment from you about listening to people. The managers hadn't felt listened to, you said previously. You know, it's listening and then kind of giving sage guidance on what the options are. So if you want to achieve this, these are the ways you could do it.
Yeah, and these are the risks. This is what could happen if you do that. Are you happy with that element of risk? Yeah. Oh no, I'm not feeling comfortable with that. Okay, that's fine. Then we can look at doing it this way. Are you comfortable with, oh yeah, I'm comfortable with that. And it was just understanding that, as opposed to, you know, well, you haven't done A, therefore you're going to have to do B.
Yeah, so it's a much more, it's results focused again, isn't it? It's like, how can you move it forward? Fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's
a really interesting role.
Yeah, and it shows as well, doesn't it? No matter how long you are in HR, there's always something that you haven't done.
Absolutely.
Some new industry, some new business, some new roles, a new way of approaching it.
Yeah.
It's what keeps us entertained so long.
Exactly. That's what keeps me doing it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Joanne. We are out of time, but some very, very useful insights there, which I hope those of you listening, perhaps who are earlier on in your careers, might find some of those takeaways really useful. Thanks very much for listening.